This is Arrow Films' recent 4K UHD release of Brian De Palma's 1980 Dressed to Kill, starring Michael Caine, Angie Dickinson and Nancy Allen. It comes with an image aspect ratio of approximately 2.35 to 1, comes with mono sound by default, but there is a rather nice 5.1 available from the menu, so that's worth listening to if you fancy seeing Dressed to Kill with a bit of surround sound. Nothing particularly special, it's not like a modern blockbuster movie, but it's got a nice surround sound feel to it, and it runs for approximately an hour and 3/4. Now, this was first issued by Kino Lorber in 2022, so probably exclusive to the American market and maybe other territories, but this is the first time this has been on general release here in the UK, and I'm not very pleased with how Dressed to Kill looks, but it might have been a stylistic choice that was taken by Mr. De Palma and the director of photography back in 1980 to go for this sort of soft, grainy look on their film. So it might be a deliberate choice that harkens back to those days, but it's interesting that in the details in the booklet that comes with this about the presentation, the 4K master was supplied by MGM via Park Circus. That's all it says, so it doesn't tell us anything much about how this 4K transfer was done. Did it come from the original camera negative? Was it the interpositive, the internegative, a general release print, or maybe a master print, a fine grain struck directly off the original camera negative? We don't know, so I can only guess as to what that is. But I was a bit surprised at how this one looked, because when you think a year later, 1981, he did Blowout, another low-light production. This is a Criterion release, actually one I imported from America before it got released over here, and I think the image quality on this is beautiful. The velvet blacks in this are just stunning to look at, and conversely in Dressed to Kill it hasn't got anything like that look. So I was surprised, I was disappointed, but it's still got very nice colour. It's sort of got that muted look, and with a Pino Donaggio score, a common collaborator with De Palma, it's just got a great atmosphere to the film. Another thing to bear in mind about Dressed to Kill, now this is my Super 8 cut down, so 3x400 foot Super 8 running about 48-50 minutes perhaps, and this of course is an American release issued by Ken Films, and over in America you got the R restricted version of the film, whereas over here we got the X uncut version of the film. So the film I saw in the cinema in 1980 was somewhat more violent than the version you saw in America, and I've got to know the film really well over the years because I've watched this so many times, and it's not half as disturbing or violent. There's not half as many cuts you see with a razor in the American version as you do in the rest of the world or the European version. So let's have a look at the 4K pack. Here it is, and the big thing about this, it's just got a 4K in there actually, but you don't need a Blu-ray because all the extras are on this 4K. And the big thing about it is all the extras. I haven't trawled through them all by any means. I haven't had the time. I think it would take hours to get through all these, but I've been dipping into them, and I watched a few immediately after the film last night, and some of them seemed quite interesting. It was great seeing Nancy Allen in 2022 still looking so great. Angie Dickinson's in there, and she was a very nice interviewee too. But I also put the film on the television this morning, and it looks a bit soft on that too, so I don't know exactly why that is. I can't give you any answers, but I suspect it was a stylised look that the makers wanted to go for when they were doing this Hitchcockian homage. And in that regard, the film that it really does have a lot of analogies with is Hitchcock's Psycho. Now, De Palma and Hitchcock were both working in the same genre, and the great man Hitchcock had gone before De Palma, so why would you reinvent the wheel when you've got such a great example with those camera angles and the atmosphere, the music, everything that went into these Hitchcock films. Maybe not so much Psycho in some respects, but some of his more colourful Technicolor VistaVisions with a blonde leading lady. You can see all of that in Dressed to Kill, and it's got a great atmosphere to it, largely helped by that Pino Donaggio score I mentioned. So a very stylistic film, and something that I've always liked, even though I always thought the Super 8 cut was better than the full feature, and after it finished last night I still felt like that. There's something about the faster moving pace of that 3x400 foot cut that I still like, but I've got used to it in spades now over the years, haven't I? So maybe if I'd have watched this a few times before seeing the 3x400, my opinion would have been different. So not the best image quality you're going to see, and this booklet I thought was disappointing too. The essays in here, the first one I struggled to get through. I couldn't get all the way through that. I thought this writer's a bit nuts, you know. I got onto the second one. He was talking about the Italian giallo films and then did get onto Hitchcock a bit, but I thought this hasn't really got much of an influence with the giallos. It's Hitchcock, and that is a right person to be influenced from if you're working in a film like Dressed to Kill and Blowout and so many others. So De Palma certainly had the style, and in many ways I actually prefer his work to Hitchcock's, but his works were later, weren't they? So I suppose that's to be expected. But despite the reservations I might have about this release, I'm still very pleased with it. So it's a 35mm anamorphic that doesn't really look up to the quality of 35mm anamorphic, but somehow now thinking about it, looking at it again this morning on the telly, maybe it suits this film. It's sort of got a dreamlike quality, and I suppose many of us have seen Carrie with the dreamlike qualities of that. Maybe it was following on from that. There's certainly some influences or some carryovers from Carrie, and I think it's a wonderful film, but is it the best thriller ever made? Certainly not, but it's just got that De Palma style. And right now I want to watch more of Brian De Palma's films once again. Maybe it's time to give Blowout another spin. But anyway, I think that brings us to the end of another one. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. Perhaps consider subscribing if you haven't already. And until the next video, bye-bye for now.